Hi, and welcome to another episode of Joy Recovery Radio. Glad you've joined us today. We're actually part 3 of a 3-part series
Yep.
on intimacy. So the first episode in the series was about intimacy with God, self, and others. And then we talked about how to use check-ins as an invitation to emotional intimacy. And today we're going to talk about a tool that you can use to have intimate yet sometimes difficult conversations, and that is the Imago Dialogue. So why don't you start off with just a little bit about what is the Imago Dialogue, history on it?
Sure. So you typically do the research. So I thought I would do a little research myself on this.
Thank you.
So what I've discovered is Imago is actually a Latin word, and it means image. The Imago Dialogue was founded back in the 1980s by Harville, Hendricks, and Helen Hunt. An interesting fact about Hunt and Hendricks is they were previously married. And when they got together, one of the things that they wanted to analyze was what contributed to the downfall of their first marriage. And what they concluded was there was manipulation, there was avoided communication, there was resentment. So these concepts really birthed this effective tool that couples have utilized for over 40 years. The reason why Imago Dialogue is so effective is it really bridges the communication gaps between the sender and the receiver. And I know that you're going to talk about that a little bit more. But it also provides safety for the couples. So how was my research?
I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Did you learn anything?
Well, you know me, I'm a nerd. I did my own research, but
Did you know that they were married before?
Mhm.
You did?
Yeah.
Did
Yeah,
you
this is their
know?
second marriage,
Do you know how many kids
and
they
they were
have?
on the brinks of a second divorce.
They were.
Yeah.
Do you know how many kids that they have?
No, don't care.
As many as we do.
18?
10. Stop.
6? Yeah,
Six.
6. Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't know that. I learned something new.
Yeah, so they had 2 each from their previous marriage,
Okay.
and then they had 2 after they got married.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
interesting fact. Blended family.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of communication potential barriers there.
Higher rate of divorce on blended
Second
families
marriage.
and second marriages,
For sure.
and third and fourth. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
And most of you know this is our second marriage.
Mhm.
So,
And we don't want to go through another divorce.
absolutely not.
No.
No.
Well, there is a distinction between discussion and dialogues that we want to highlight. And this is what I mean by that. Typically with a discussion with another person, like you and I having a discussion, the whole time that you're talking, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say.
Hmm.
And so I'm not really practicing what we would call deep listening.
Mm-hmm.
And if I am feeling defensive in some way because of something that you've shared, especially if it's a difficult conversation, not only am I structuring my rebuttal to what you're saying, but I now want to make sure that I properly defend myself. And so to do that, I'm going to go on the offense, and I'm going to try to pull apart what you're saying, find holes in it, and come up with carefully crafted words that help me, quote unquote, win.
Yes.
And when you, quote unquote, win, both parties lose.
Absolutely.
There are no winners.
Never.
That's the nature of most discussions, is that I'm not listening to you to understand, I'm listening to form a response. And I'm reactive. So that's a discussion. A dialogue is all about psychological safety. It's all about creating an environment where there's only one objective, and that is I step into your reality and I understand it. I may or may not agree with it, and that's not the point. The point is not agreeing. The point is not winning. The point is not defending myself. The point is we have 2 different realities here. The Imago sets up a structure where the focus is, if I'm the receiver and you're the sender and you're sharing something with me, I only have one goal: to step into your reality and to fully understand it, to mirror it back to you, to validate your reality, whether I agree with it or not, and to empathize, to imagine what you may be feeling as a result of that reality. So that's the distinction between discussion and dialogue. When do you call a dialogue? When do you call an Imago Dialogue? Before you call an Imago Dialogue and you do this for real, we recommend that you do dialogue training, minimum 2 weeks, about either positive or neutral topics. And we're going to send a link in the show notes that
Yeah.
that goes to a website called imagoworks.com that has great guidance on how to do an Imago dialogue and 20 topics that are really good practice. So the very first dialogue we recommend that you do is actually an appreciation dialogue. So it's positive, because the last thing we want to do is set some kind of association to where Imago dialogue is a negative thing. It's all about psychological safety, especially for difficult conversations. So when do you call a dialogue? Get your practice first, at least 2 weeks, on neutral or positive topics. Very first one, what do I appreciate about you? That's what we recommend. It's a gratitude. But you do it within the structure. You're practicing the structure because it can be awkward and it can feel unnatural, and we'll talk about that more later. So after you've done your dialogue training for minimum 2 weeks, safe, neutral topics, there are 3 occasions where we recommend that you call for an Imago dialogue. Number 1, if you're wanting to feel understood. If you feel like you're about to talk about something, and typically in the past, you don't feel heard, seen, understood, this would be a good time to call an Imago dialogue. Second, if you are upset about this particular topic, then that would be an appropriate time for an Imago dialogue. However, disclaimer, don't call the Imago dialogue while you're upset. Get calm, get into a good place, but definitely have the dialogue about what it is that was upsetting you. Third, if you feel like your partner is going to get upset and you're concerned about their reactivity, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, if you're concerned about abusive or avoidant type behaviors as a result of this topic, that would be an appropriate time to call an Imago dialogue, as long as there's a shared commitment that we're going to stick to the structure. The structure creates safety, and the structure eliminates all possibility of reactivity, but only if you follow it. If you don't follow it, if you violate it, if you weaponize it in some way, now you've tarnished the tool, and it's going to be that much harder to use it in the future.
So one thing I do want to share and be very transparent about is when we introduced the Imago dialogue in our relationship, I was a little skeptical. The Imago dialogue, some basic criticisms that people have voiced is it's structured and it feels unnatural. And it does. So for someone like myself who's just ready to have a conversation, let's just talk this out, I hear you, you hear me, bygones be bygones, I agree to disagree, whatever it is. Now we're doing something that is very structured, where I don't have an opportunity necessarily to jump in when I want to. I need to listen to understand. And the other person is listening to understand, but they're going to repeat what they hear. So there is a very unnatural element when doing the Imago dialogue. But with time, that will sizzle out and it won't feel so structured and rehearsed.
When it comes to the Imago dialogue, there's a couple of really big benefits that stand out to me that I experienced. Probably the biggest benefit was psychological safety. And most of us men, we don't want to admit that we are afraid, that we have fears. But most of us, if we're honest, there are certain topics that we are terrified to be transparent about. And we have a lot of fear. And a lot of times that fear is the potential response, reactivity from our partner. Or we're just intimacy avoidant and we don't want to talk about that. And so if we're going to pursue intimacy, emotional intimacy and transparency with our partner, and we're going to talk about things that typically we would never disclose, then we need some kind of environment that is psychologically safe. The structure of the Imago dialogue, if you stick to it, provides that safety. You don't have to create it. You maintain it. And you maintain it by sticking to the structure. Even though it feels unnatural, it's by design. The most important thing you can do is create safety, psychological safety, to where we can talk about something that's really hard to talk about. Because if you don't have safety, one of two things typically happens. A person will go to either silence or violence. And those are the two signs that psychological safety have been violated. If I go into silence, if I go into stonewalling, if I go to avoiding, if I shut down, if I control the narrative, if I do all those things, that is an indication I don't feel safe.
Yeah.
This feels out of control to me. And so I'm going to try to exercise some control. And I'm going to withdraw. And I don't feel safe. Just imagine this image. Imagine that you and I are having a conversation and there is some kind of container in between us. And that container represents shared meaning, where we understand each other. The only way we get to a container that's full of shared meaning is if you feel safe to contribute your reality, I feel safe to contribute my reality. You share your emotions, I share my emotions. You share your fears, I share my fears. If there is safety, we can fill up this container of shared meaning. And the more full the container is, the more intimacy you have. The more full the container is, the better we can collaborate. The more full the container is, the better decisions we make because we know each other. Intimacy is being fully known and fully accepted and fully loved. It's you feeling safe enough to pour that last 20% of your truth into the container that you don't want to share. And I feel safe enough to pour my last 20% that I typically would not share because I feel safe. The container, that metaphor we're using is the Imago Dialogue. It is the container. It's inviting you and I into emotional intimacy, for you to pour your reality in, for me to pour my reality in. And now what do we have? We have a third entity. We have a shared reality where we feel understood. That's emotional intimacy. That's really tough for men. It's tough for any human, but it's tough for men who have spent their whole life avoiding intimacy, pursuing false intimacy by acting out. And now I don't act out anymore, but I act in. And act in is, I don't want to pour anything in that container. I want to avoid intimacy. I want to constrict and hide within myself. And the way I avoid intimacy is either by lashing out at you or acting in and withdrawing.
Yeah.
Either way, I'm not contributing to the pool. If someone goes into silence, they don't feel safety. The other indicator of a lack of safety is violence. And that is, this is my container. I'm going to control it. I'm going to force you to see things my way. And now it's no longer silence, but it's violence. And what we mean by that is, I'm going to take over this conversation.
Yeah.
I'm going to get my way one way or the other. The big benefit of Imago Dialogue is it creates that safety that's necessary to create that emotional intimacy, to have that shared reality that's poured into this container. Another huge benefit is it practically eliminates reactivity. Anytime you and I in the past had an emotionally charged conversation, I would typically go into defense mode. And there would often be two dynamics that would happen. I would go into some form of resentment in some way, and I would unconsciously see Jacqueline as the enemy. And because you're the enemy, you're no longer a person with a reality that I want to understand. You're an enemy with an agenda that's against me. You are not for me, you're against me. We're no longer a team, you're a threat. And because you're a threat, I'm going to defend myself, and I'm going to try to win this conversation. There has never been one incident, you correct me if I'm wrong, there's never been one incident of any reactivity from me whatsoever when we do Imago Dialogue. And typically when I'm the receiver, when you're trying to share something with me and I'm the receiver, that's when I would be reactive.
Yeah.
I didn't carefully choose my response. I didn't seek to understand. I didn't seek to validate and empathize. I sought to defend and win.
Well, can I say why I think that is?
Mhm.
There's a big difference between what you say and what you hear.
Hmm.
And I appreciate that because that most of the time is where communication tends to fall apart. We hear something in a tone that the person who is the sender doesn't mean for their words to be taken the way that the receiver has taken them.
We wanted to let you know about our latest upcoming webinar on April 26th. We will be taking a deep dive into what Bill W. from AA called the final frontier of recovery, and that is emotional sobriety. Are you in recovery and ready to move beyond Stage 1 recovery, sexual sobriety, and embrace Stage 2 recovery, emotional sobriety's well-being? Then this webinar is for you. Are you a betrayed partner who wants to develop emotional resilience and regulation in the midst of your grieving and trauma? Then this webinar is for you. We have a few spots open at the time of this recording, so go to joy-recovery.com and click on webinars to secure your reservation today.
One of the benefits of Imago Dialogue for the men in particular, I'm not going to speak for me, but I'm going to say something that's probably going to rub the men the wrong way, and they may bristle, may be controversial, but I think if they think about it and reflect on it, they'd have to admit that there's a little bit of truth to this. Because of years of lust, pornography consumption, objectification of women, our minds become conditioned to view women in a certain way that is devaluing and dehumanizing. And if we're honest, we would admit that. And it's subtle and it's unconscious, but it's there. It's not a question of if it's there, it's a question of do we recognize it? What I like about the Imago Dialogue is it forces me to lay aside seeing you as less than, devaluing you in any way, seeing you as other or different. But here's the main objective of the Imago Dialogue. Your perspective, your reality is equally valid with mine. It humanizes you. It revalues you. It doesn't see you. It doesn't allow me to see you subconsciously, unconsciously, as less than, as other, as different. But the whole focus, as the receiver, there's only one goal: to validate your reality as equal to mine.
As a woman, that's really hard to hear. It is. And I appreciate you sharing that insight. But that's really hard to hear.
But it's important. It's important for us to use tools that recondition our way of thinking, especially unconsciously, to where we rehumanize and validate and revalue our partners. And their perspective is not dismissed.
Right.
There are things you share that I don't agree with, but it's equally valid. That is your reality. I want to understand it. I want to value it. I want to affirm it. I want to make sure I completely get it. Because it's not about right or wrong. It's not about agreement. It's about honoring you. And you walk away from the conversation, you feel respected, you feel valued, you feel seen, you feel heard, recognized. And that is very healing.
It is very healing.
Well, let's just talk about the structure right quick, what the
Okay.
role of the sender is and the role of the receiver is. What I just want to mention, the reason there is a sender and receiver is that a basic tenet is this: one person talks at a time. That's critical. Only one person talks at a time. Therefore, there is a sender and there is a receiver. And the sender is in control. You have the opportunity to flip roles later, but whoever the sender is, they guide the conversation. They're steering the ship. There's no two captains going on. There's one captain and one person speaks at a time. So what does the sender do?
So ladies, please, the sender, this is a time for you to be able to state your emotions and make sure that your words aren't being twisted or manipulated, or even used against you. So what the sender is going to do is to make sure that both parties are in a really good headspace to have the Imago Dialogue, which is really important. You don't want to have the Imago Dialogue if you're feeling triggered or if you're feeling hypervigilant. Like, you want to have a zen state as best as possible, depending on what it is. First step is you're going to request an appointment. And so basically it would say, hey, Roy, at some point today, I would like to have an Imago Dialogue. So if you can just let me know when a good time is so we can schedule that. It may take about 30 minutes, but I think it's really important that hopefully we can get this done today.
And as a receiver, I feel respected because you're honoring my current state and if I'm ready or not. And I don't need to stonewall at this time. I do need to honor I'm not in a good place to have the conversation right now. But ideally, as a receiver, within the next 24 hours, you need to respond. Beyond that, it does have the appearance that they're stonewalling.
Yeah.
going on.
So the whole purpose is to schedule an appointment. As crazy as that may sound, it's very important to make sure that both parties can listen to be understood.
Can I interject something here? And I'm curious about your opinion.
You need to request an appointment, of course.
What are your thoughts on this? Because I just thought of this, and I have some thoughts, but I'm curious about your thoughts. The natural inclination when the sender says, hey, I'd like to schedule an Imago Dialogue with you, the natural inclination of the responder is what? What is it about?
Mm-hmm.
That's the natural inclination.
Or they automatically assume that it's
They want
something
to
negative.
know what's the topic? What are we going to talk about? What are your thoughts on that?
That's true.
But should that be asked and should it be answered?
I mean, it's not like cookie cutter. I think that in most times when I've called an Imago Dialogue or you've called an Imago Dialogue, I know what it's about. I'm pretty confident. I know
There have been
what
times when you
is
had no clue or you
right.
were wrong.
That's true. I think it's a case by case. I think it's up to the couple.
I would agree with that. My own personal thought on that and preference really is it doesn't matter what the topic is. Your partner that you love wants to have a deep conversation with you. She's inviting you into emotional intimacy. Quit trying to control what it's about. Quit trying to go ahead and prepare your responses. Just honor the request and let go of control. Just let go. Just what are you going to say? No? So that's my own bias towards
Yeah.
that. Of course I'm wanting to know. I could go ahead and start formulating my talking points or I can start future tripping and catastrophizing that, oh, she's going to do this, she's going to say that, and it's going to go awful. And instead, it's just the love of my life wants to have a heart-to-heart conversation with me. I'm going to honor that. It doesn't matter what the topic is.
So when it's my turn, I've requested to make the appointment. Now I am going to share. So we're now into the Imago Dialogue, and I'm going to share. So let's just do a really quick share. So we'll go through the structure really quick, and then we'll get into just a really quick example.
Okay.
So the share is basically, I'm going to respectfully share whatever emotion, potential conflict, positive, whatever it is, I'm going to share at that point my feelings. So an example is, Roy, I felt really upset when you watched a movie and you relied on VidAngel to filter out all of the potential tempting scenes in the movie. Because as we were watching that movie together, there were scenes in the movie that was very triggering to me. And we can't rely on VidAngel or ClearPlay to be 100% accurate when it comes to the safety of our relationship. And so I felt that there was some due diligence that you could have done. So pause. At this point, I've stated what I wanted to talk about. I've summarized it. And now he's going to mirror what he thinks he heard me say.
Right. And that was a short example, but let's say that she went on for longer than that, and it's 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. It's completely appropriate as the receiver to make sure that you don't get so much information that you can't mirror, for you to ask for a pause and just gently say, could we pause for a moment? And I want to make sure that I'm with you. And what I hear you saying is that now you paraphrase back to the sender what you understood. And you don't use this opportunity to do any sending. That would be inappropriate. This is only mirroring. That's the very first step for the receiver, is to mirror.
And not to defend. So that's what you meant by sending.
There's no analyzing. There's no defending. There's no
excuses.
making excuses. There's no explaining. There's no commentary whatsoever. There's a zero reaction from me other than trying to paraphrase and mirror back to you what I understood, and then asking you, did I get that?
Great. Did I get that?
And is there more? And those are the cues you're going to follow. You're going to mirror. You're going to paraphrase. This is what I heard you saying. In my own words, did I get that?
Okay.
Is there more? So in this particular scenario, you sent that message, and so my paraphrase back to you would be something like, what I hear you saying is, you were upset by that movie we watched because I relied on VidAngel as the sole source of protecting the content that was going to be in that movie. And there were some scenes in it that were very triggering for you. And this upset you because you wished that I had done more due diligence to not just rely on one tool, but to be thorough to protect what enters into our home. Am I getting that right?
You are. And I want to also add that I harbor some anger towards the person who recommended the movie to you. So I feel like the fact that there was a recommendation from someone And then obviously that we have clear play, that you didn't take every possible step to ensure not just my safety, but also yours. You know, we know that nothing is 100%, and we can't rely on someone else's word, because what their boundaries are might not be the same as ours. And so I think that this could have easily been prevented had a little extra precaution.
All right, let me make sure that I'm tracking with you. And let me press pause and just provide a little bit more commentary for the receiver. So as the receiver, not only are you mirroring or paraphrasing what your partner is saying, but you're mirroring the tone and the body language and the emotion. For example, if she was in tears, it would be inappropriate for me to laugh, to smile even. I need to mirror, if it's sadness that I'm sensing from you and that's your tone, I need to join you in that. That's part of mirroring. It's not just verbal, it's also nonverbal. Also, eye contact, facing each other, is really helpful. You don't want to be looking that way and I'm looking this way, and now it's almost as if we're talking to someone else, but there's an intimate exchange going on here. And then you paused. I didn't have to pause you, but I have that right, but you paused, and it was enough that I think I could paraphrase. So I'd probably say something like, so not only was there some disappointment and frustration with me because I did not do the due diligence that you would have preferred to protect what both of us are exposed to, but there was some anger that a trusted person actually recommended this show. And it was multiplied by the fact that you don't want me to assume that other people have the same boundaries
Absolutely.
that we do. So this compounded it.
Absolutely.
Or-
1,000%.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else?
I think that's it.
Okay.
I think that is a really good summary of what I wanted to share with you.
Okay. So if you noticed, as the receiver, you mirror, you paraphrase, you mirror, you mirror, you mirror, and you keep asking over and over again, did I get that? What else? Is there anything else? And when the sender finally says, I think that's everything that's my reality for this topic. Because another commentary, one topic,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
one topic. If the sender has another topic, that's another imago. Each imago has one topic. So you dig deep into that topic and make sure she's poured all her reality into the shared container here. And there's not a drop left. She has nothing left that she needs to express about it. And I have paraphrased and mirrored everything. Now it's step 2 for the receiver, and that is validate. And the cue that you can use to begin your validation is to say something like, that makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that would be your reality, and then explain why. And that's validating. Invalidating would be things like, well, why do you feel that way? And I would hope that you would be over that by now. And things like that are invalidating. So instead of invalidating, you want to validate. So in this particular simulation, I would say something like, it makes sense to me that would be your perspective in light of the commitment that I've made to keep us both safe and to never go into lust or objectification again. And then to allow you and I to be exposed to this. Your reality makes total sense to me.
And then the next step is, which I think is so important, empathy.
So going into empathy, a cue for empathy could be something like, I imagine that you might be feeling, and then you're making an educated guess. You've received the sender's comments, you've stepped into their reality and paraphrased it, you have validated that they have every right to feel that way, and it makes sense to you that they would feel that way. Now you want to take a guess.
There are feeling prompters. If you print out the sheet, there are feeling prompters that they provide you. But one thing that I appreciate about the empathy part is when the receiver states something like, if I were in your shoes. Because to feel empathy, it's putting yourself into someone else's shoes, putting yourself in the position and their position.
Mm-hmm.
And so I prefer that instead of, I can see where you might feel X, Y, and Z. I really like, if I put myself in your shoes.
The effort is really what matters here. And more often than not, you probably will get it accurate or somewhat accurate. But even if it's not accurate, that's not a fail. You are attempting to put yourself in her reality and feel what she's feeling. And that effort is meaningful. And you're building your empathy muscles, and you're going to get more and more accurate. But to close out my third part, I have mirrored, I have validated. Now I'm ready to end with an empathy statement. And then we've added one element for our own coupleship that's not part of the dialogue. So let's simulate empathy, and then we're going to add our own little twist to the Imago Dialogue. When I put myself in your shoes, and I think about your reality, and I'm in a relationship with someone who has struggled with decades with objectification, and they've committed to me that they want to keep us both safe, and they never want to objectify another person. For them to let this exposure like this happen, I would be feeling pretty profound disappointment in them. And I would be feeling some justified anger at the person who thought it was a good idea to recommend this movie for us. Does that tap into your emotions? Do you feel understood?
I do. I appreciate the validation, and I appreciate you putting yourself in my shoes and seeing my perspective as best as you can. I do appreciate us having this exchange and you showing up and being very present and vulnerable during this conversation.
This particular relationship, years ago without Imago, 1,000 ways sideways. It would not have gone well
No,
at all.
if
And you would not be feeling like you were validated, understood, heard, valued, that there was empathy
no,
happening.
zero.
No.
So at that point, you can just simply do exactly what I did. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being vulnerable. And then you can ask the person, would you like to switch? I will say that you can have a dialogue exchange, but there's not, when you're doing what the paper says, it doesn't provide resolution. This is just a communication. So if you've had a rupture or something where there can be potential steps to eliminate or reduce hurting the other person, there's an opportunity. You can reference it as a gift. You can label it as restitution or amends.
Making it right, or it doesn't feel like it's resolved unless there's some kind of commitment or action on your part. And you'll know when that is necessary. This particular simulation, I feel like if I was the receiver and this was the context, there needs to be a commitment. There needs to be some resolution where not only do I understand her reality, but I do something to make it right, to prevent this from being her reality ever again.
So as the sender, a part of me really buying into empathy of him putting himself in my shoes, a really big win for me would be an action plan. So I've done this. This was really painful for you. I'm truly sorry. But here are the things that I would like to implement moving forward so this doesn't ever happen again. And that to me is true validation. That is acknowledgement. That is reassurance. And that is empathy. Like to have some sort of action plan that follows to say, I will put this effort forth to make sure that this is not an issue in the future for our relationship. That if that comes out of an Imago Dialogue exchange, it was well and beyond worth it. Because not only does it bridge the healthy communication, but it also gives two people a way to really power couple together and say, let's put these steps forth so we don't ever revisit this again.
In this particular simulation, with this particular topic, if I was to take no action, no commitment, no amends, I just did my 3 parts as a receiver and then moved on with my day, I don't think you would be feeling like there was resolution, that you were truly understood, and I truly empathize with you because I took no action to make sure it didn't happen again. I checked the box. I played a role, but there was no resolution. So it might look something like, we have finished the Imago Dialogue. This is an addendum. This is the next right thing I'm feeling like I need to do. And so I might say something like, I am really grieved that I dropped the ball here. I'll let you down and I'll let myself down. I'd like to make a commitment going forward. I want to make a commitment that I am not going to rely solely on a single source, whether it's VidAngel, ClearPlay, IMDb, whatever, and assume that it's safe. But I'm going to leave no stone unturned, due diligence to check everything at our disposal to make sure that we're safe. And at the first hint that something's not safe, not wait for you to say something, not be passive, but to shut it down immediately.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's an Imago Dialogue.
That's an Imago Dialogue. If we were to quickly do it again, a simulation, it would take us maybe about 5 minutes.
Yeah, we added a lot of commentary and
Yeah,
explanation
we
there.
did.
Yeah. In the show notes, we've got some resources there that show this is the sender's flowchart. This is the receiver's flowchart. Here's the 20 topics that we recommend you practice with as part of your dialogue training before you have a more challenging conversation. And we appreciate you joining us. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Choose joy.